We are so glad that you are joining us today for Breakout Room 5, the principal's critical role in leading change for early literacy. We are so glad to have Dr. Byron Darnell and Angela, is that
Ballinger.
Ballinger? Thank you. I didn't want to mispronounce. And Mike Bell. We have an awesome team here to share with you all the great things going on in the state for literacy and your important role as a principal. And thank you all for being here today. And I'll hand it over to you all.
Thank you so much, Mary. We're very excited about our session today, and thank you all for jumping into our session. We think that what we're going to share today is very crucial and valuable to your role as a building principal. So we're going to get right into the information. So who are we? Well, we are your regional principal support leaders. I get the privilege every day of working with Mr. Mike Bell and Dr. Byron Darnell. And we are so excited to have these roles. And thinking back for my time as a principal, I would have loved to have had someone who could have been a thought partner with me outside of my district that wasn't going to um, be evaluatory or have any perceived notions of my situation. So please use us as a thought partner for your building. Literacy is our passion. And also, I wanted to draw your attention to our 5 state regional literacy directors. They too are here to support you in your work in your buildings. That's our desire as a state is to help all of our kids become effective, um, proficient readers before they actually leave 3rd grade would be our preference. So please reach out to us. Um, Moving right along, the PEASL standards that we are going to be covering today, we want you to know that principals as effective leaders create a shared mission and vision for high quality education and student well-being. We as building principals must ensure that we have rigorous curriculum and assessments and are implementing them with fidelity. I know that's the bad F word today, but it's so crucial. Um, so this presentation will address your PEASL standards that are listed there. And finally, if we truly believe that every child has a basic human right to read, principals have a moral imperative to monitor and ensure equitable practices that nurture students' self-efficacy and lead to comparable outcomes. Guys, I think of all of the responsibilities that I had as a building principal. One, of course, is always school safety. And second to that is a child's ability to read. So, as a building leader, it's so critically important that we provide our teachers with the resources and the continuous professional development to drive our students to be able to access high quality materials and learning resources so that they can be productive readers. So at this time, I will turn it over to Dr. Darnell.
Actually, I'm going to jump in here really quick if that's all right, and
Yes.
and hit a couple of slides. My name is Mike Bell. We're just so thrilled that you have joined with us today, as Angela said, and we're about networking and about building a community, and that's one thing that we, as our regional principal support leaders, that's what we want to do. We want to be able to be that support that you want and that you need, and we're willing to do that. But just a couple things as we move through our presentation today. We understand your role. Your role is it comes with a lot, and we understand that. And if we can come in and help support you in this implementation of early literacy, and just help you in developing or pulling resources and things that are helpful to you to help take some of that stress off. That's what we want to do. But we just thank you. We want to thank you for your leadership and your just willingness to be here today to learn with us. We know that, we're just human. We're going to do the best that we possibly can. We know that you all are bought in, or you wouldn't be a principal. You wouldn't want to take on all of that you do. And we want to thank you for that. And we know through this process, sometimes we just get overwhelmed with stuff, but we know that your intent is so positive, and we're so excited for you and for that. And we want to make sure too that we believe in you wanting help as well. I think sometimes we feel like that we're on this island alone. You're not. So let this time that you've had today, let it connect you with people. Maybe you're just now meeting, and we want to be part of that also. We want to be part of those connections. You may have heard of this before, but we've been as we've been building this presentation, this has been one of the neatest things to come up and really think through. But the parable of the guarded bench, it says a new post commander arrived on a base and noticed a singular bench near the barracks with a soldier standing guard. He was there 24 hours a day. So he's a new commander coming in, just like if you're a new principal coming in. He asked a fellow officer why the bench required 24-hour supervision. The officer replied that it had been a standing order for as long as he could remember and as long as he has been at the base. He then asked why. The officer did not have any other answer than it was an order. And we always follow orders. The new post commander wanted to know why soldiers were required to guard this bench around the clock. So he started investigating. And you can probably already see where this is going. You've probably been in sort of the same thing. After rummaging around and asking questions to veteran officers, he discovered the order was given long ago because the bench had recently been painted. And the soldier simply to keep anyone from sitting on the wet paint. And just because it became routine, they kept going. They kept doing it. And it just become something to just follow orders. So we've got our first couple questions for you. What benches are we guarding that no longer need guarding? And you probably walked into that. It's like, why are we doing what we're doing? And is it something that I really need to take a re-look at something? So you could probably go ahead and right off the top of your head, name 3, 4, 5 things that were already there in place. And you had to, in your early tenure, probably had to figure out, am I going to keep guarding this bench or am I going to change? So now it's, what benches should we begin guarding or we continue to guard? And those are the things as we move through this presentation that I think we want you as a team to start thinking about. What are some important programs, things that I'm using right now? What are the things I need to really buckle down and start focusing on? That's not wasting time, but that's changing my students' lives as well as my teachers. Because you are the teacher in your classroom and your teachers are your students. So that's something you need to think about as you go along this process. So by the end of today's session, I'll understand the importance of creating a vision for early literacy and evaluate the degree of fidelity with which we are pursuing the vision for early literacy. And now, the one and only Dr. Darnell.
Oh, Byron is perfectly fine. I don't know if your parents or those that raised you were always saying you're only as good as the company you keep. Choose your friends wisely. It still is sage advice, and I think that applies professionally. And I'm sure this room is full of individuals who are grateful for those we count on. Some would call it who's on your board of directors, who are the people you go to when you don't know what to do. And, none of us have all the answers, but, the collective wisdom just really is the basis for moving forward. And, we talk about isolation as a principle, and it feels that way a lot. But I do think isolation is a choice, and if you're fortunate, then you have that community within the district or your building, which is ideal, but there are individuals that you can find and are willing to be a listener and to just think through. And so we promise none of the answers to the complex problems we have, but we're certainly willing to do the work that may relieve you of some of the things you don't have time to do. And then, as mentioned, call the collective wisdom that we have here. I see some familiar names, and it's just an honor to be with you here this afternoon. And thanks for just giving some of your time for this entire day in the EdCamp. You are the reason that this exists. So we're extremely excited to see the number of individuals participating. I'm sure you all probably know the picture here is of our beautiful Capitol. It's still impressive to walk in there and just look up, and it puts you in a little bit of awe. Over the last 4 years, I've spent a lot of time going into this building. And of course, as you notice, it has been surrounded by machinery because it is under restoration, which seems to be going on a long time. But it just made me think a little bit, that you have all the scaffolding around the top structure there as they begin to restore it. And scaffolds make learning reachable. They are not permanent, but they're essential. In education, scaffolds are about leveling the playing field. Without support, frustration sets in and learning grinds to a halt. And I'm sure we've all personally experienced that, and we've all probably seen that professionally. However, the appropriate scaffolding is important, and the work on the Capitol would not be possible simply using just a ladder or a few ladders. It's quite complex, just like our schools and our buildings and the learning that we're trying to instill. And a generic scaffold doesn't cut it. They must fit the demands of the task. And the same can be said for leading literacy efforts in schools. Again, it's complex. Each of us could use scaffolding, but we all do not need the same type. And the same can be said about our teachers within our schools. And, this is a microcosm of our classrooms. Everyone needs something different. And that is extremely difficult to put together, especially just trying to lean into this, in as a sole person, so we can advance forward one. I know we hear this a lot. What is your why? It's kind of like there are certain words in education that we just get tired of hearing. Fidelity, as Angela mentioned just a bit ago, it gets tainted because it was just like we have heard this, we've been browbeaten with it, and it's just simply knowing what it is that we're doing. My oldest daughter is swimming. They're preparing for regionals, and over the break, they were doing two a day. She did not want to go. And so we would just have these motivational conversations. And I get it. Who wants to go 2 times a day on break, in the morning, in the afternoon, and get in the pool? I don't. She has that skill and is doing so. And so we just had to talk about, well, why would you do this? And goes, well, I want to be ready for regionals. And so it's just reminding her, I know today this is tough, could be staying in bed, be a lot simpler. But 4 weeks from now, that's the culmination for you. That's what you're going for. We have to maintain that why, and why early literacy is the foundation for all student learning. We're always grappling with the fact that we're responsible for all learning. That's all content areas. That doesn't mean that other contents are not important. It's just that without the ability to read well, to comprehend what you're reading, the other content areas suffer as a result of that. So it is just this distinct foundation that cannot be ignored for our students. And then focus on the why of science of reading approach. Offers all students access to the curriculum. I know, again, the reading wars are real. We all probably have very strong opinions and personal experiences about reading. And it really is a shame sometimes because we get caught up in the minutia of fighting about what is the right way. But we certainly have learned a great deal across multiple decades of research and observing the best interests of our students. And we're not trying to isolate just a particular function of reading, but we are trying to put together the best package that we can to ensure that all students have access. And then, of course, the foundational skills must be the cornerstone of early literacy. One thing is that I found probably in common with a lot of individuals. Most of my career has been spent at the secondary level. And then upon getting the wonderful opportunity to be an elementary principal, I had to become a learner. I knew that there was a lot that I needed to work on to be prepared to go into my school. And I think there probably are a lot of situations that are similar to this in terms of just the knowledge, the background, the ability to sort of understand what it takes to get to reading. For me, reading, I couldn't tell you that moment when I could just read. I wish I could go back and pinpoint that, but at some point in time, I could. The words made sense to me. My son has struggled with reading, and it has been a process to try to pinpoint where he struggles. His brain, like his two sisters, it didn't turn on for him one day, and he's had struggles with that because he doesn't see himself as a reader, and as someone who loves to read, that's pretty crushing. It's like, I don't, and then you have two other children that can read, and so it just highlights the complexity of this for our students at that pre-K and that K through 3, especially as they're trying to get to a point where they have confidence in what they see on the page, to be able to articulate that, and then, of course, begin to comprehend it and understand it at the next level. So when we say the why in this early literacy, it is really just just the cornerstone of everything. As we have had the great opportunity to have conversations with principals, be in schools and districts, we've been on this journey of adopting high quality instructional materials, or resources, as we call it in Kentucky. And then we often ask, the stages. Where are you in the stages of implementing your HQIM? And of course, one being the very first emphasis on that our leaders do know why we're doing this. And then beginning stage 2 to work within the curriculum and begin to, as we say a lot of times, roll out the curriculum. And then 3, beginning to monitor the curriculum. A lot will respond that stage 3, we're monitoring the curriculum. So Mike, if you'll fast forward one there. So just using the chat feature here, we don't have a poll, the ability to do the poll within the Zoom currently, but in your particular instance, in the stages, do you feel that you have established a vision statement for early literacy within your district? If that's a yes, it's a 1. If it's a no, it's a 2. So if you just type that in, don't hit your, okay, we're coming through. Here we go. Making sure it works here. So we have 1, 1. Seeing some yeses come across. So something to consider too, is, in a lot of cases when we're talking about our vision and thank you, in the process with the team too, and I know it's hard to be vulnerable too. So again, we're just we're learning here to move forward. So, there are different approaches to this which can get complicated too. Do we do this at a school level? Do we do this at a district level? Is it embedded within our vision and mission as a district? I think these are the conversations that are really important within the seat that you're residing in as a district to be collective on how this is to be articulated. And it is a process. I love that, I see Rhonda is mentioning in the process with a team. So team being the key element there. Um, it is easy to get in a hurry and to shortchange this. And we, as leaders, have, we've absorbed a great deal about developing a vision, having a vision. In a lot of cases, we walk into scenarios where there is already a vision and mission that we are adopting because it was established prior to our entrance into a particular building or position. And so it is an opportunity to really be critical about the words that we're using, and are we really identifying what we believe at our core to be true about what we're seeking as far as the reading instruction that's taking place in our schools. So we just encourage to interrogate that, to really look at whether or not, Allison in her prior session is internalizing. Is it internalized? So that we understand, we meaning everyone understands, what it is that we're seeking to support. And again, we get into the work. We're all guilty of that, jumping into, let's just begin with the curriculum and let's start looking at the lessons. And we sort of let that sit in the background and it gets a little hazy. And so is it really at the center so that we're all reminded of the importance of this difficult work that we're trying to undertake? Certainly want to point to, and all of this will be available on the grid for your perusal. One thing we also understand is that finding something on KDE's site is not a pleasant experience a lot of times. It can be quite frustrating. We understand it, trust me. Bureaucracy at its finest. And so we do have samples that are available through KDE, and certainly anyone within my counterparts and Mike or Angela or the state literacy directors, we will be glad to do the legwork for you. Just please let us know. I think Joe was saying it earlier in his keynote. Sometimes we intend to inform and we just overwhelm. And I find that all the time. And the three of us are talking about that all the time, especially in the principal's seat. The lack of time to really dig in and spend chasing things down is just not viable. And so we do it when we can. And a lot of times we just don't because we see other things that we need to be giving our attention to. And that's just absolutely natural for every single one of us. So we can't stress enough just really interrogating that stage one and whether or not enough time and intentionality has been given to that initial stage. Again, as Allison was saying earlier too, this is a long 3 to 5 year implementation. We understand, because the students are in front of us every day, that the moral imperative is real. We need to do it today and now, but for the benefit of long-term goals, this is such an integral process in terms of what we're trying to accomplish as a collective school or a collective district. And again, we just cannot shortchange getting and understanding what is the why behind what we're doing. So when you look at, I'm going to click off the chat here. So, that gets into, as I was referring to a second ago, the stages of curriculum implementation. So we have the four phases here, as I was referencing just a little bit ago. Prepare for the process. Um, and I understand that we're pretty good a lot of times of admiring the problem. We do a lot of that. I know I have done a lot of that. We admire the problem. Well, we know we have a problem, and we think about it and we think about it, and then sometimes we're aggravated because we're not just getting to the action part of it, and it's just our nature. I think a lot of times we're in education because we fix things. We see something and we want to fix it, and I think in a lot of cases that's what that brings success, but for the holistic view of it, preparing for that process is is very slow and can be very aggravating. A lot of times we hear if we're going to do something, if we have an initiative, we want to focus on getting 80%. I'm sure that 80%, 80/20 rule. I know I've heard that many, many times. We need to get 80% on board before we move forward. I would push on that a little bit. I think we need 100% on board because if you have, resistance is real. And when it comes to something as critical as this early foundation, this early literacy, this is 100% in an all-in mentality and really working on making sure that we are positive that we're going in the direction that we want to go. So looking at other resources that we're just trying to simplify a couple of things here. So looking at the sample vision statements and really interrogating the vision that has been established within your school or district and or the creation of that vision at this time or beginning that process, even more importantly. There's also the curriculum implementation framework that can be an excellent resource to help guide you in terms of what should I do next? And I think about the question of what do I do when I don't know what to do? And this is an excellent resource for just pushing your individual thinking and your school's thinking in terms of where we are and putting these processes in place, the stages that we're beginning, that we're in the middle of, or that we're developing. And it really gives each level from district down to students. So I just encourage to take an opportunity if you have not already. Some of you may be very familiar with this, but if you are not, then certainly want to utilize any resources that may help cultivate the steps process, the stages process for each and every one of you. And I'm sorry, I'm trying to click back up, make sure I'm not missing in the chat. Yeah, absolutely. As Brandon is saying, we know this change doesn't happen overnight. And and just to be honest, we all are really adverse to change. I mean, we all are. It's extremely difficult, and especially as you get along in years, we become very set in how we do things. And anyone within a household has probably had conflicts about our idiosyncrasies that we do, and it's difficult. But the patience that it does take is substantial. And so I appreciate you putting that in there. But yeah, absolutely. We have to take the time in order to get on the path that leads to something that is going to be long term and not just in the moment. And if sorry, Brandon, you're putting it in there, so I want to comment on it. But going in the wrong direction. If who we probably have several parents in this room here currently, and is anyone so bold to say that being a parent, you have stuck to one way of raising your children? Is there anyone that since the beginning you've stuck to it, one way of raising your children? David says nope. And thank you for interacting. I always feel like, talking too much isn't always a good thing. But yeah, gosh, I mean, hit reset. How many times have I hit reset as a parent? Um, and in a lot of cases, professionally, that is extremely difficult to do. We have reasons why we're in leadership positions, and a lot of those reasons are the successes that we've had. But that doesn't mean that every success is going to lead to the next success. And it's extremely difficult to be hard on yourself and say, I may need to step back. We may need to rethink how we are approaching this. And if we're seeing ourselves in phase three and or phase four, implementing and monitoring the curriculum, what gives us confidence in the first three phases that we feel phase four is the appropriate action to take at this time? And that is an extremely difficult and vulnerable thing to do if you are sitting in the principal's seat. It's to, have a moment of needing to stop and rethink the first three phases and how are we sure that we have confidence in the steps that we have taken, the time that we've given to each of those phases, and whether or not the evidence is pointing us in a direction that we have confidence that those phases and those expectations have been met. So it is the difficult process of slowing down. And that is just not something that we are very good at by any stretch of the imagination. So if you'll go to the next slide there, Mike, we use the term buy-in quite a bit. I think it's a common phrase that we've often used. I like to substitute that with ownership. If we have ownership over something, it's personal. We have a vested stake in this being a success. And so a lot of cases we're looking at ownership versus compliance. I've been told to do this, so I'm doing it. And we know that the two are worlds apart in terms of being meaningful to me personally, professionally, versus it's an external requirement that I'm meeting professionally because that's what is being put before me. So to use the chat feature again, would you say staff exhibits ownership or compliance in implementing the curriculum? And it's ownership is a 1, compliance is a 2. Thank you, Teresa and Michael, Brandon, David, Chris, Danielle, Emily. So it's interesting. So we have a combination of 1s and 2s coming in so far. And so, if someone, thank you, Kelly, if I know we interacting on Zoom is not the most fun thing to do or the easiest thing to do, but we would love it because it would be better to have a little bit more conversation in terms. But if you're at a 2, would you be willing to share what gives you an indication that it is more compliance driven than ownership driven? Like what are the feedback that you're getting that is leading you into the 2?
I think that not all of my teachers have done this, but in like pockets, some of them have made the comments, "Well, this isn't working," um, so they kind of want to throw it out and go to another resource.
Thank you, Danielle, and thank you for coming online to say that. Absolutely, great example. What's another example that would give you an indication that you see more of a 2 And again, not whole scale, but if there are twos, then there's obviously you're working through resistance. What's another example of a two?
In the chat, we have, I see it happen as staff here is following the curriculum map developed by the district.
Thank you, Brandon.
We have started using a new program this year, and they feel like that the productive struggle is too advanced for the students. And so they want to take ownership quicker and say that the kids can't do it. And so they're not given that time for that productive struggle to kind of work itself out.
Appreciate it, David.
Continued in the chat, we have from Brandon's, he said, with them sometimes knowing something may need change, but we're not a part of the process to make the change happen. Another in the chat, resistance with new HQIR, wanting to change the resource without really trying or trying to understand. They like what they were doing before, even though the results weren't there. And also in the chat, great responses. I haven't recently switched positions and am now in an early childhood position. Some of the teachers are saying that the HQIR is too difficult for the students' understanding. So great comments.
Yes, thank you, Emily, for putting that in. And so we see the commonality in a couple of responses, the difficulty. And we're we love our kids, and when we see them struggle, we tend to want to rescue them. It's again, it goes back to a sort of our natural inclination of wanting to fix it. And when we're loving them to novice, Megan said, yeah, absolutely. And again, all of this is coming from good intent. It's not an indictment. And I would say we're all guilty of doing. I know I personally have been guilty of doing too much for a student, or underestimating a student's ability. And that's on me. That's my own hang up in not wanting to believe and to find the appropriate scaffolding to help work to get those students to a place where it becomes more comfortable. And so, all of this induces fear as well. It's a fearful response that we have. And none of us, again, it goes back to change, none of us enjoys that feeling because it doesn't make us feel successful. We feel like we're failing. And if I am not capable of using the curriculum to the ability that I believe, then I'm going to have hesitancies about it. And so all of this shift is just very emotional. It is absolutely emotional. And we cannot remove that from the equation. And it's emotional for us as the principals and leadership roles because we want to see it succeed as much as anyone else. But at the same time, it pushes us back into a corner, and we revert back to what we know. We revert back to what is comfortable. And again, all of this is just natural to us as human beings, which again makes it extremely complex and difficult to manage. If you did not see, or you were not in Allison's prior session just before this one, she has an excellent session on the curriculum-based professional learning guidance document. And again, I know we're probably doing the thing that maybe we shouldn't do. We're not trying to, we're probably overwhelming, but there are 3 documents here that are extremely beneficial or may be extremely beneficial to you. And so if we had to narrow it down, we would invite you, if you have not, to take some time to look at the 3 documents: the vision, the sample visions, the model curriculum framework, and then the curriculum-based professional learning. And then, of course, the state literacy directors have had also other sessions from today that are, if you did not get a chance to tune in, they would be extremely beneficial to go back to. And we've listed those out on this slide, which will be available to you on the EdCamp grid, just in case. But All of these are meant to reinforce the use of these documents. And hopefully it is a little bit easier to find if you have not had them in front of you yet. And if you want to flip forward one more, Mike. We also just want to advertise an opportunity together on June 13th for the Summer Reading Conference. This will be in Louisville, and principal participation is key. You all are making magic happen. You all are doing wonderful things each and every day under very difficult circumstances, and we cannot thank you enough.